everyone, welcome back to my channel. I've got another review for you guys today. This time we're talking about carrot cake from Kringle Candle. And for those of you who were around last year, you might remember carrot cake. We had it in the country candle jar format last Easter. The clear apothecary jar with the sort of candle carrot wraparound design printed on the jar. This year we're seeing it in this Kringle style jar. These are 22 ounces, 100% soy wax. The jars are painted. You can see this one's orange with sort of a silver speckling texture on there. You can actually feel that texture on the outside of the jar, which is really nice. Beautiful label here. The only thing I could absolutely critique at all, and this is getting really nitpicky here with this packaging, is that this label, and I think it was my chocolate eggs candle, the labels, you can kind of see it's a little bit crinkly. It wasn't exactly super smooth on the jar, which, you know, isn't the end of the world. You can kind of peel it up and fix it a little bit. I didn't want to mess with it too much here, just in case I ran into a problem. I still wanted to be able to sort of film this candle for you guys without making too much of a mess here. But, you know, for those who are collectors or whatnot, I know it's a $34 candle. That might mean something to you. Hopefully they get that sort of straightened out though. But that's really the only thing I could possibly critique here with this packaging. I really love it, and I really love this label. This collection and all the other fragrances in it will be launching on Thursday, March 20th at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. And I mentioned these are going to be priced at $34. We also have 3 wicks coming, and those I've reviewed 2 of them already, and I have one more to talk about briefly before the launch. The 3 wicks I think will be at $26. So if you're shopping this launch, feel free to use my code if you're comfortable. That is Simply Scented. It will be in the description of this video. Just be aware that is a commissioned code, so I do get a small percentage of any sale made with it. So thank you so much to anybody who plans to use it or has ever used it before. Your support means a lot to me and this channel. So thank you guys again. For those who don't know, I am a Kringle Candle ambassador, which is why I have that code. And Kringle did send these candles to me, the new fragrances that I've been reviewing here for you, as a gift or PR, however you want to phrase it. So thank you again to Kringle for sending these over. I'm glad I've been able to kind of get these reviews out to you ahead of the launch so that you can make those decisions. So thank you once again. And today, this is a pretty straightforward fragrance. There is a little bit we need to talk about here in terms of comparison to last year, but we're going to try to keep this a little bit to the short and sweet side of things. So for notes, we have top notes of carrot cake, mid notes of spice, base notes of vanilla frosting. So the notes here, I mean, they're pretty much to the point. They are identical to the notes that we were given last year for that country candle format of carrot cake. I did reach out to my contact over at Kringle, and to the best of his knowledge, the formula was the same. They didn't really necessarily make any changes. Unfortunately, I did not have last year's version. It sold out before I could get my hands on it. So I don't have that here side by side to compare for you. From what I have been hearing from other ambassadors who did have last year's version, and just based on what I had heard about last year's version from all of you guys out there, I feel like the general theme is that last year's version was a little bit heavier on the spice, while this year's is a little bit heavier on the vanilla frosting. So, you know, again, because I didn't have that version, I can't really speak to that. It could be something as simple as, well, they didn't really change the formula, but year to year, different batches, there can be just some slight variance in, you know, the way things are poured, or if there's just a subtle difference in a fragrance oil. You think of it kind of like Italian cooking. For those who are like me, I don't use a recipe. I just kind of have my sort of mental recipe here, and we don't measure. We just kind of throw things in and you eyeball it, and it tastes generally the same each time, but there can be some slight variations here to there depending on your ingredients, or depending if you're a little heavy on one ingredient in particular one day to the other. So it could be a situation like that where they didn't really change the formula but there is a subtle change in the way that it is smelling or coming across to all of you. So again, that's about all we'll talk about in terms of comparison, since I don't have that old version. But for today, we're just gonna kind of talk about what I'm getting from this candle itself and what my experience has been. If you caught my preview video, I think, it's over a week ago now, I mentioned that I was having a little bit of concerns with the burn of this candle, so we will talk a little bit more about that here as well. But getting back to the fragrance here, our notes of carrot cake, spice, and vanilla frosting, pretty straightforward. The only thing that's really up for interpretation here a little bit is the actual carrot cake note. So if you think about your traditional carrot cake, there can be some variance to recipes. Some families, you just have your sort of spice cake with your carrot shreds in there, and that's it. I know a lot of people include raisins and walnuts. Maybe there's something else that I'm missing. I am not a huge carrot cake fan myself eating. Traditionally, it is made with a cream cheese frosting, which I'm not particularly fond of. But so, if you think about that carrot cake recipe, there can be a little bit of a variance here. For what I'm smelling, it smells traditional in the sense that this smells like a sort of rich, somewhat moist, kind of a dense cake. And I apologize for using that M word. I know that's kind of a trigger for some of you. A lot of people don't like that word. I just could not think of anything else that would be appropriate. But that is sort of the cake that I'm getting here. The spice to me feels sort of baked in. It's not spice forward in a super astringent, spicy way. It's more of that baked in bakery spice that kind of blends into the overall cakiness here. The spices specifically, I would say I get mostly cinnamon. I get a little ginger, a little bit of a nutmeg, and maybe a hint of a clove in here as well. But again, because these spices are kind of bakery and baked into that cake, they're not super duper prominent. It's not, I wouldn't consider this a spice heavy fragrance. The sweetness here, I get a lot more of that, frosting. The carrot note, I would say on cold, it had slightly more of a vegetal quality to it. Into the burn here, that carrot starts to feel more baked and sweet and kind of condensed. If you've ever roasted carrots in your oven, they take on a very different flavor when they're roasted and baked like that versus your fresh carrot. That's kind of the quality I'm getting here as it's burning, is that sort of sweeter, richer carrot note, kind of blended into that overall spicy, cakey quality. The frosting piece, it does not have the tang of a cream cheese frosting to me. This is, they say vanilla frosting. I would put this more in the category of a buttercream. The longer I've gotten into this burn, I have noticed a little bit more of a buttery quality kind of coming to the surface here. So I would say we're definitely looking in that sort of buttercream range. It's fairly sweet. It's surprising me how sweet this candle is, just based on hearing how spicy some people described it as last year. So I really wasn't expecting the level of sweetness I'm getting here, but it's not coming across as cloying. It is balanced out with that spiciness in the background, and it's very creamy as well. So if you think about your sort of vanilla frosting kind of layered in a good dose over that carrot cake, almost like the picture here, if you will. You have sort of a good dose of frosting over the carrot cake, but there's no frosting on the side. So I would argue that this cake definitely has frosting covering the whole cake. It is definitely got a frosting sort of vanilla creaminess going for it. So depending on how your feelings are here, if you prefer a sweeter sort of bakery candle, you like that frosting piece, this might be perfect for you. But if you're looking for a little bit more of a spicy punch, you might be slightly disappointed here. And that's not to say there isn't any spice. There's definitely a sort of spicy component, but I just feel like it's kind of overshadowed a little bit by that sweeter aspect. I would also argue that maybe there's a little bit of a brown sugar quality going on here as well with this cake. Just a nice, sweet, creamy sort of spice cake type of fragrance with a little bit of carrot in there. As for those other elements I mentioned, some carrot cakes will have raisins and walnuts. You know, I don't really get that distinctly, at least not distinctly enough to say, oh yeah, there's definitely a walnut here or definitely a raisin. But because we have a sort of non-specific carrot cake note, you know, it doesn't feel out of place to say that maybe there's a hint of a raisin or a hint of a nuttiness or a nutty undertone there. So if you were to smell it and say, no, I definitely smell a little bit of that, I wouldn't argue with you on that because, I mean, it's all up for interpretation. Scent is very subjective. And sometimes when you associate something, your brain kind of fills in the gap. So if you swear you're getting a raisin or a walnut, you know what? That's great. I'm not going to argue. Personally, I don't really get that myself. But, you know, again, all up for interpretation. So, onto the performance piece of this candle. So in my first impressions video, I did mention having a little bit of a concern about where the burn was heading on this fragrance. And I will say for the first three or so burns, things were a little bit dicey and I was a little bit concerned that this might start dudding out on me. So what happened was in my first burn, I left the wicks at their normal length. I did not trim them at all. I've been told you don't have to trim them. Usually I do, so maybe this was my mistake. Usually I take just a little bit of the length off of them, but this time I just left them as is. I lit it up, and I noticed it was taking a little bit longer than usual to pull. The flames weren't getting quite as big. Not puny wicks or anything like that, but just not the usual intensity of my Kringle candles, and especially when I compare this to chocolate eggs or Easter petals, which I've also been burning, those have burned a little bit hotter from the start, and this one has been a little bit more tame overall. It is, as you can see, there's, you know, a decent pool there. I'm about 2/3 of the way in now, but again, you know, the overall pattern with this candle is a little less hot. I really have not had much need at all to trim the wicks, other than maybe just a tiny, tiny bit off the top to start the burn, but it's not getting big carbon balls. It's also been burning cleaner than the other two in this format, which, not to say that the others were dirty, but the others have a little bit of a soot accumulation going around the top of the jar. This, you know, has not had any. It's been very, very clean, which I assume is because of the fact that it's burning a little bit less hot. I have not put this in a hurricane at all. I didn't want to drown out the wicks by trapping too much heat, since they seem to have a little bit harder time keeping up. I actually haven't used a hurricane for any of the reviews. I should have noted that. So if you've been following my Easter reviews, I have not used a hurricane at all. This has all been just the candles themselves, you know, out in the open. But, you know, it's burning well enough that I would say it's not like a problem burn. I've been giving it a little bit longer burns, and I feel like it's been doing better when it does have those longer periods, like 4 to 5 hours to burn and really get itself going. But it is definitely a noticeable difference in terms of the overall power of these flames versus the other two in this collection that I've been burning. So just to keep that in mind, if you do pick it up, you might want to kind of leave your wicks a little bit longer than maybe you would typically, just in case you start to have the same issue, because if you over trim, it's a little bit harder to correct. Not impossible, but it can be harder. So, you know, you could always take off more if you need to, if you feel like yours is getting hot. Maybe this is a one-off. I haven't heard from any of the other ambassadors or checked their reviews yet to see how theirs have been burning. But the only caveat there with that, I feel like it has impacted the throw just a little bit. I would say this has probably been sort of a medium, you know, 6 range intensity in terms of the overall potency of the fragrance. And it does well. It fills my kitchen area. The ability to travel, so the actual throw of the fragrance, it will come a little bit down the hallway, a little bit into my open concept space, but not as much as I would have maybe expected from such a sort of rich fragrance. So, you know, that could just be the overall burn being a little bit on the cooler side, toning down that strength and throw just a little bit, but still a noticeable presence. I'm happy with it. Personally, you know, I've been finding this an enjoyable fragrance. It's something I would consider repurchasing in the future. You know, if I'm being totally honest though, it's just lacking a little bit of a wow factor for me. Wow factor, you know, in terms of the other candles in this collection, Lemon Sugar Marshmallow and Easter Brunch last year, those had a pretty big wow factor for me. They really like were ones that I wanted to make sure I had one more of in my collection. this is more like where it's enjoyable enough that I would buy it again, but I'm also not panicking if I don't get another jar. You know, it's kind of one of those sort of warm general bakery sort of candles, which I feel like there's, you know, several others out there that are kind of more available that you can kind of probably get your hands on, you know, if you want this sort of feel without necessarily being, this being super, super unique, if that makes sense. So thank you guys for watching. As far as comparisons, I think that's the only thing we have left to talk about. Comparisons. I have not burned Bath & Body Works Sweet Carrot Cake. The only one I really know to compare this to is the old Yankee Candle Carrot Cake, which from what I remember, and it has been years, guys, I remember that being more in this sort of sweet, cakey, frosting type of realm rather than being a super spice heavy fragrance. So if you liked the old Yankee Candle Carrot Cake, I feel like this has probably been the closest that I have found in terms of similarity of you know, the formula here. I think I've smelled Goose Creek in the past, and I remember it being spicier, but I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, I don't have too many others in terms of comparisons for you guys, but you know, pretty straightforward. If you want a lot of spice, you might be underwhelmed. If you like a sweeter bakery fragrance with a nice homey feel, you'll probably love it. So let me know if you pick this one up. Thank you guys so much for watching. My next review will be for chocolate eggs. So if you want to get alerts for that, make sure you subscribe. And if you enjoyed this video, if it helped you decide either way on carrot cake, give this video a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all, and I hope you have a great day.